The report landed on my desk like any other. Elias Thorne, 27, experienced hiker, vanished near the Echo mine. Missing persons routine. The mother's voice, fractured with a desperation I'd become numb to, crackled through the phone. Static. A persistent hiss like a trapped insect, layered over her pleas. I'd heard it all before. A husband lost at sea, a child swallowed by the city. Each a fresh wave of grief washing over a landscape already scarred. My office mirrored the weather, grey, damp, and devoid of anything resembling warmth. Fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous dirge over the chipped laminate of my desk. The filing cabinets, crammed with forgotten cases and unanswered questions, loomed like silent judges. I tapped the report with a pen, the click a sharp punctuation mark against the storm brewing outside. The Echo mine. Locals whispered about it, cursed, they said nonsense. The geological surveys were the first anomaly. Public records stated a standard copper and iron ore deposit, depleted and abandoned in the late 70s. But the internal memos, hastily scanned and filed, contained inconsistencies, anomalous readings, references to unstable strata and localized magnetic disturbances. Phrases scrubbed from the official narrative. I ran a hand over my face, the stubble rough against my palm. It was probably just faulty equipment, wishful thinking from a geologist desperate to justify his existence. Still, something snagged in the back of my mind. A dissonance. I'd seen enough to know that people didn't invent grief. They didn't invent the ache of absence, but they did invent explanations. And those explanations, however flimsy, often served as a fragile shield against the abyss. My own shield had fractured years ago, a detail I rarely volunteered. The decision to take the case wasn't driven by altruism. It was driven by inertia, by the dull throb of needing to fill the hours, by the faint, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, something in this case would be different. I signed the contract, the scratch of the pen a brittle sound in the oppressive quiet. The drive was a descent into monochrome. Rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the already bleak landscape into streaks of grey and black. The radio sputtered, spitting out fragments of static and distorted country music. Each mile further isolated me, the world shrinking to the confines of my Ford Taurus. The wiper sieve thwacked rhythmically, a mechanical pulse against the rising dread. The Echo mine loomed on the horizon, a jagged scar against the bruised sky. The entrance, a gaping maw of shadow, exhaled a damp, earthy smell that clung to the air. I pulled the car onto the shoulder, the gravel crunching under the tires. The storm intensified, the thunder a low, guttural growl in the distance. A metallic screech, like metal grinding against bone, echoed from the mine's depths. Probably just the wind, I told myself. As I checked the rearview mirror, a flash of emerald caught my eye. Just for a moment. A pair of luminous eyes reflected in the rain-slicked glass. Gone before I could properly register it. A trick of the light, I reasoned. Rain, shadows, fatigue. I dismissed it, but the image lingered, a cold weight in my gut. The engine sputtered to life, a mechanical sigh. I started the car, the tires spitting gravel as I began the long, slow ascent. The ascent was brutal. The Taurus strained against the incline, the engine groaning like an old man protesting a sudden exertion. Rain hammered the roof, a relentless percussion against the silence that pressed in from all sides. The mine mouth itself was less a grand entrance and more a wound in the hillside, choked by a tangle of thorny vines and skeletal trees. Fog, thick as curdled milk, clung to the ground, obscuring the lower reaches of the opening. I killed the engine, the sudden quiet almost painful after the mechanical din. The air tasted of damp earth and something else, something acrid, like burnt metal and decay. The smell clung to the back of my throat. I killed the headlights, wanting to see 40 or not see 40 with my own eyes. The rain continued its assault, blurring the edges of the world. The sheriff, a man named Barlow, was waiting. He leaned against his cruiser, a figure sculpted from fatigue and resignation. His face was a roadmap of weathered lines, his eyes the color of a storm-churned sea. "Nguyen, right?" he asked, his voice raspy, like sandpaper on wood. "Judah Nguyen," I corrected automatically. A habit from years of dealing with people who didn't respect procedure. "Heard you were common. Don't go pokin' around where you ain't welcome." His words were less a warning and more a weary observation. "Just doing my job, Sheriff." I kept my tone neutral professional. He grunted. "This ain't like the city cases you're used to. The Echo mine. It's got a way of shifting things." "Shifting things? The ground, the air, the feelings, it ain't right, Mr. Nguyen. Never has been." He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the rain-soaked asphalt. Folks say it breathes. Don't pay him no mind, of course. I ignored the implication, the local color. Superstition was a predictable byproduct of isolation. I'll be careful. He didn't reply, just nodded towards the mine entrance. Don't say I didn't warn you. The interior was a labyrinth of collapsing tunnels and rusted machinery. The beam of my flashlight sliced through the oppressive darkness, revealing walls slick with moisture and the skeletal remains of mining equipment. The air grew colder, heavier, with each step. The silence was the worst of it, 20 to profound, unsettling stillness that swallowed every sound. No drips, no scurrying, no rustling. Just nothing. It was a silence that felt twin wrong. I documented the obvious collapsed shafts, corroded rail lines, the detritus of a forgotten industry. Standard mine workings abandoned decades ago. The geological surveys had been accurate, at least on the surface. The metallic tang in the air intensified, a constant, low-grade irritation in my nostrils. Then I saw it, a section of track, remarkably clean amidst the pervasive rust, a cigarette butt, crushed underfoot, a brand I didn't recognize. Recent. Someone had been here. The thought sent a prickle of unease down my spine. The sheriff's warnings echoed in my head, hollow and unsettling. I checked my compass, a vintage piece I'd inherited from my grandfather. It spun wildly, the needle jittering erratically, useless. I'd read about magnetic anomalies in the geological reports. Probably just that. Probably a faint twist scrape resonated from deeper within the mine, a sound like metal dragging against stone. I froze, my hand instinctively moving to the flashlight. The silence returned, heavier than before, just the rain drumming against the entrance. Just the wind. I pressed on, deeper into the darkness. The air grew colder, the metallic smell more pungent. I passed a chamber filled with what appeared to be old surveying equipment. A clipboard lay discarded on a table, the ink on the forms blurred and faded. A name was scrawled across the top, Elias Thorne. My pulse quickened. A coincidence? I doubted it. Another scrape, closer this time, a low guttural thesis seemed to weave through the air. My flashlight beam danced nervously, searching for the source of the sound. I felt a sudden, irrational urge to turn back, to abandon the investigation and drive away as fast as possible. But I couldn't. The contract, the mother's voice, the nagging dissonance. I continued forward, the darkness pressing in, the silence amplifying every breath, every heartbeat. The mind seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. The name Elias Thorne clung to the air, a phantom scent in the metallic tang. I checked the clipboard again, the blurred ink mocking my efforts to decipher it. Thorne. The geological surveys made no mention of him. Neither did the mine's historical records, another anomaly. I pressed onward, the beam of my flashlight carving a narrow path through the suffocating darkness. The scrape returned, closer still, accompanied now by a subtle, almost subsonic vibration that resonated in my teeth. It wasn't just metal on stone. It was deliberate. The tunnel opened into a chamber unlike any I'd seen before. It wasn't a natural cavern. The walls were roughly hewn, the ceiling supported by timbers that looked disturbingly new. And then I saw it, a basement. A full-fledged basement carved into the bedrock of the mine, a space utterly absent from the geological surveys, from the historical records, from Fuviv everything. It was an impossibility. The air in the basement was colder, heavier, saturated with a cloying sweetness that fought with the metallic scent. A single, bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow light that seemed to drain the color from the room. And in the center of the basement, dominating the space, stood a wardrobe. An antique wardrobe crafted from dark, polished wood, its brass handles gleaming faintly in the dim light. It looked utterly impossibly out of place. My pulse quickened, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I circled the wardrobe, my flashlight beam dancing across its surface. It was meticulously maintained, the wood unscratched, the brass polished to a mirror sheen. It felt wrong. Too clean. Too perfect. I reached for the handles, the brass cold against my fingertips. The wardrobe swung open with a soft creak, the sound echoing eerily in the confined space. Behind the clothes, behind the hanging coats and neatly folded trousers, was a wall. A solid blank wall. Not the rock face I expected. A wall constructed of the same dark wood as the wardrobe itself, another impossibility. I ran my hand across the surface, feeling for seams, for hinges, for any indication of a hidden mechanism. Nothing. It was just a wall where a tunnel should be, a wall that shouldn't exist. The sense of being watched intensified, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I could feel eyes on me, unseen, unheard. I pulled out my journal, the leather cover cool against my skin. 40 basement. Wardrobe, impossible. Architecture. I wrote the words in a shaky hand, the ink blurring slightly, feeling of observation increasing unease. The words felt inadequate, failing to capture the full extent of the dread that was creeping into my bones. The tapping started then. A faint, rhythmic, thick tap, 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 coming from the other side of the wall. A slow, deliberate rhythm, like someone waiting. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear. The tapping continued, unwavering, a subtle counterpoint to the pounding of my own heart. The metallic smell intensified, becoming almost suffocating. I felt a sudden overwhelming urge to leave, to run back to the Taurus and drive away, to forget I ever saw this place, but I couldn't. The contract, the mother's voice, the dissonance. I turned away from the wardrobe, scanning the basement for any other clues, any explanation for this bizarre anomaly. My gaze fell upon a small table tucked into a corner. On the table lay a photograph, faded and yellowed with age, a family. A man, a woman, and 2 young children, smiling stiffly at the camera. I didn't recognize them. I didn't recognize the house in the background. I didn't recognize anything about the scene, and then I saw it. Tucked behind the photograph, almost hidden from view, was my compass, my grandfather's compass. I picked it up, examining it closely. It hadn't been there before, I'm certain of it. I held it out, expecting the needle to point north. Instead, it began to spin. Slowly at first, then faster and faster, the needle whirling wildly, a frantic dance of metal and magnetism. The tapping from behind the wall intensified, a rapid, insistent tampy tap, 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 tap. The spinning accelerated. The photograph slipped from my fingers, landing face down on the table with a soft thud. The compass spun faster, a dizzying blur of silver and red. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm was insistent now, a frantic pulse echoing the tremor in my hands. I forced myself to breathe, to analyze the photograph. The compass. The impossible wall, each a piece of a puzzle that refused to assemble. The basement itself was small, maybe 15 feet square. The walls were bare, the concrete stained with dampness. A single wooden table stood against one wall, the photograph and the compass resting upon it. A straight-backed chair sat opposite, as if awaiting a visitor. It was sterile, too clean for a mine basement, too deliberately arranged. The geological surveys hadn't mentioned any furniture. Nothing. I ran a gloved hand along the cold concrete, the texture rough against the latex. The air hung heavy, the cloying sweetness still present, battling with the metallic tang. I tried to recall the layout of the mine, the progression of tunnels. It was becoming difficult. The details blurred, the memory shifting like sand. Had the tunnel really opened directly into this room, or had I taken a wrong turn? A disorienting wave of nausea washed over me. Scrape. The scrape, the sound was faint, distant, but undeniably there. A heavy, dragging sound coming from above. From the mine shaft, I froze, listening intently. The tapping from the wall stopped. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. I held my breath, straining to hear. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was definitely a dragging sound, something heavy being pulled across the floor. My rational mind offered explanations, settling debris, a shifting rock face. But the sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic. It felt purposeful. I moved to the corner of the basement, pressing my ear against the concrete wall. The scraping continued, echoing faintly from above. I scanned the ceiling, searching for cracks, for openings. Nothing, just solid rock, reinforced with those unsettlingly new timbers. I shone my flashlight upwards, the beam swallowed by the darkness. A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing. Just shadows, playing tricks on my eyes. The high-contrast monochrome of the flashlight beam exaggerated every imperfection, every irregularity in the room. Then I saw them, emerald eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. A flash of black fur, a cat, a large cat bigger than any domestic feline I'd ever seen. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, melting back into the shadows. I blinked, wondering if I'd imagined it. The exhaustion, the stress, the unsettling atmosphere. It was all getting to me. I checked my equipment, flashlight, journal, camera, Geiger counter. Everything was present and accounted for. Except for my sanity, perhaps. I was starting to doubt my own recollection of events. Had I always been this meticulous? Had the tunnel always led to this basement? Had the photograph always been on the table? The compass began to spin again, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. It was no longer pointing north. It was pointing deeper into the mine, deeper into the darkness. I gripped the compass tightly, the cold metal a stark contrast to the sweat on my palms. I felt a compulsion, a pull, drawing me towards the unknown. Tap, tap. The tapping resumed, softer now. Almost imperceptible, it seemed to be coming from directly behind me. I slowly turned around, my flashlight beam sweeping across the wall. The wardrobe stood silent, its polished surface reflecting the sickly yellow light, and then I saw it. A distorted image, flickering in my peripheral vision, a fleeting glimpse of a grinning face framed by shadows. Its eyes burned into mine, a silent, predatory gaze. I gasped, stumbling backwards. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared. I blinked, disoriented, unsure of what I had just seen. The tapping stopped, the compass spun wildly. The dragging sound from above intensified, growing louder, closer, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I wasn't alone. The compass needle vibrated, a frantic tremor against the cold metal. It insisted, relentlessly, that I move forward into what? The mine had ceased to be a network of tunnels. It had become a labyrinth, a mockery of geometry. I consulted the geological surveys again, the flimsy paper crinkling in my trembling hand. They were useless. The layout they depicted bore no resemblance to the twisting, looping passages before me. Each turn brought a new disorientation. A junction I was certain I'd passed moments ago reappeared, subtly altered. A familiar rock formation shifted, its contours blurring as if viewed through heat haze. I began to record everything in my journal, meticulous notes on angles, distances, landmarks. A futile exercise, I knew, but the act of recording felt grounding. A desperate attempt to impose order on the chaos, hum. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the rock, a physical presence against my sternum. It wasn't a mechanical sound, not the whine of machinery. It was organic, almost alive. It seemed to emanate from the very walls, resonating in my bones. I paused, listening intently, but the hum persisted, a constant drone beneath the surface of my perception. The cat materialized again, a fleeting shadow at the periphery of my flashlight beam. Emerald eyes burning bright in the darkness. It didn't flee this time. It simply watched, a silent sentinel, then vanished around a corner, as if beckoning me to follow. I felt a surge of irritation, a childish urge to yell at the creature. But I didn't. I simply followed. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, the ceiling lost in the oppressive darkness. And there, scattered across the floor, were the remnants of another expedition. A rusted pickaxe, a tattered canvas bag, a pair of cracked goggles. Photographs, too. Faded, water-damaged images of men in mining gear, their faces blurred and indistinct. They stared out with a mixture of hope and apprehension, unaware of the fate that awaited them. A wave of nausea hit me, stronger this time. Memories long suppressed began to surface, my father's face etched with disappointment. The sting of his criticism, the weight of his expectations. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting to regain control. This place, it wasn't just messing with the layout of the mine. It was messing with my head. Scrape. The dragging sound returned, fainter now, but still distinct. It seemed to be coming from deeper within the labyrinth. I shone my flashlight down the corridor, but the beam was swallowed by the darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, the cloying sweetness intensifying. I stumbled over something on the floor, a metal container dented and corroded. I knelt, brushing away the dust. Inside, I found a collection of personal items, a worn leather wallet, a silver locket, a child's drawing, belongings abandoned in haste, a testament to the desperation of those who came before. A chill ran down my spine. The compass spun faster, the needle vibrating violently. It was no longer pointing towards a direction. It was pointing towards something, a presence. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Hum, the vibration intensified, resonating through my teeth. The cat reappeared, perched on a rock ledge, its eyes glowing like embers. It tilted its head as if mocking my confusion. Then it let out a low, guttural hiss, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my very soul. I quickened my pace, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere. The tunnels twisted and turned, each passage identical to the last. I was lost, utterly and completely lost. The mine was playing with me, toying with my sanity. Then I heard it. A fragment of conversation, drifting from a corridor ahead, muffled, indistinct, but undeniably human. Another one lost. The fragment of conversation clung to the air, a phantom echo. Another one lost. It was gone before I could decipher more, swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. The compass needle, previously spinning wildly, abruptly snapped back, then locked. Not pointing forward, not indicating a direction, pointing further behind me. A wave of nausea rolled over me, a familiar, unwelcome guest. The mine wasn't just disorienting me, it was dredging up things I'd buried deep. My father's voice, sharp and critical, resonated in my skull, a phantom reprimand. The smell of dust and damp stone intensified, mingling with the sickly sweet aroma that had plagued me since entering this subterranean hell. It clung to the back of my throat, a taste of decay, the symbols. They were there again, etched into the rock face. Crude, almost childlike in their execution, yet unsettlingly familiar. Spirals, interlocking triangles, a recurring motif of a stylized eye. I'd seen them before somewhere. A forgotten corner of my childhood, a dream half remembered. The geological surveys hadn't mentioned any markings. The mine's official records were sterile, sanitized. These felt personal. My boots scraped against the uneven floor as I retraced my steps, the flashlight beam jittering with my unsteady hand. The air grew colder, a palpable chill that seeped into my bones. The scrape. Sound returned, closer now, more insistent. It wasn't just a dragging sound anymore, it had a rhythm, a deliberate cadence. Scrape, pause. Scrape, like something heavy being pulled across a rough surface. The photographs from the previous expedition seemed to mock me, their faded smiles, their naive hope they hadn't known. They hadn't understood the nature of this place. I ran a hand over the rough texture of the wallpaper, a strange floral pattern, incongruous with the harshness of the mine. It felt wrong. Like a stage dressing, an attempt to mask the underlying rot. The cat reappeared, a silent shadow gliding across the beam of my flashlight. It was closer this time, almost within reach. Its emerald eyes burned into mine, radiating an unsettling intelligence. A low ficcated emanated from its throat, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I felt a surge of irrational anger, a desperate urge to lash out at the creature, a childish impulse to blame it for my predicament. I pushed past the feeling, forcing myself to focus on the compass. It remained fixed, stubbornly pointing behind me. I hesitated, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Turning back felt like inviting something to follow. But the compass didn't lie. Not about this. It pointed to death. The chamber opened unexpectedly, a vast cavern stretching into impenetrable darkness. The air grew thick, heavy with a cloying sweetness. The hum resonated through the rock, intensifying, vibrating in my teeth. I could feel it in my chest, a physical pressure. The silence was broken by a sound that made my blood run cold. A child's laughter, faint, distorted, echoing from the depths of the cavern. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy, a sound that felt profoundly wrong in this place. The dragging sound was unmistakable now, emanating from the far end of the cavern. Scrape, pause, scrape, closer. I shone my flashlight, the beam swallowed by the darkness. I could feel the weight of countless eyes upon me, a palpable sense of being watched. The photographs scattered on the floor seemed to swirl, their blurred faces twisting into grotesque caricatures. My legs felt heavy, leaden. Each step required a monumental effort. I wanted to run, to flee this place, but the compass held me captive, its unwavering direction a silent command. The air grew colder, the sweetness more suffocating. I tasted metal on my tongue, the coppery tang of fear. Then, the compass needle violently retracted, disappearing into the casing. A sharp snap echoed in the cavern. It locked, not pointing forward, not pointing backward, pointing directly behind me. The hum intensified, a physical pressure against my eardrums. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a vibration, a resonance that seemed to emanate from the very rock itself. The chamber amplified it, a grotesque tuning fork vibrating, with a frequency that felt designed to shatter bone. The metallic grinding escalated, a relentless screech, scrape, clank that drowned out all other thought. It wasn't just the dragging sound, it was a chorus of them, layered and overlapping, a mechanical orchestra of despair. Then the vision started. Not clear images, but fractured glimpses, like looking through a shattered mirror. A Minna frozen mid-swing, his face contorted in a silent scream. A family huddled around a table, their smiles strained, their eyes wide with a terror I couldn't quite grasp. Thorne, the expedition leader from the reports, his mouth open in a soundless yell, a pickaxe suspended above his head. Each image flickered, fragmented, then dissolved back into the oppressive darkness. They weren't memories, not mine anyway, they were. Impressions. Echoes imprinted onto the stone, bleeding into my consciousness. A resonance. My hand trembled, the flashlight beam dancing erratically across the cavern walls. The air grew thick, heavy with the cloying sweetness, coating my tongue with a sickly film. It was like breathing in decay, a palpable sense of corruption clinging to the back of my throat. I tasted metal, a coppery tang of fear that intensified with each grinding screech. My mind felt porous, vulnerable, like a radio receiver picking up signals from a frequency I shouldn't be hearing, a disconcerting gap. A moment where the grinding ceased, the visions vanished, and I was left suspended in a silent, suffocating void. Then, just as abruptly, it returned. The screeching, the scraping, the fragmented images. My memory felt unreliable, fractured. Had I been standing here all along? Had I moved? I couldn't be sure. A creeping paranoia began to coil in my gut, a cold serpent whispering doubts. The cat sat in the center of the chamber, bathed in the flickering light of my flashlight. It hadn't moved. Its emerald eyes burned into mine, radiating an unsettling stillness. It wasn't the wild, frantic gaze of a feral creature. It was knowing, almost pitying. A low frick-lick resonated from its throat, a dry, brittle sound like bones shifting. It felt like a judgment. The clicking intensified, rapidly increasing in volume. Click, click, click. It was a rhythmic pulse, synchronizing with the grinding, a perverse heartbeat echoing through the cavern. It resonated within my skull, a physical pressure behind my eyes. The images became more vivid, more insistent. The Miners' scream felt closer, the family's terror more palpable. I felt a strange connection to them, a sense of shared suffering. My legs felt weak, unsteady. I leaned against the cold, damp wall, struggling to maintain my balance. The wallpaper, that incongruous floral pattern, seemed to writhe in the flickering light. It wasn't just wrong, it was mocking me. A desperate attempt to mask the underlying horror. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to scream, to lash out at the cat, to break something, anything to silence the relentless grinding and the echoing visions. Then, a jolt. Another gap in my memory. A feeling of disorientation, of being adrift in a sea of fragmented impressions. I blinked, trying to clear my head, to regain my bearings. The cat remained motionless, its eyes fixed on mine. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, to the compass. I pulled it out, the metal cold against my palm. It was then I realized something was terribly wrong. The needle wasn't pointing forward. It wasn't pointing backward. It wasn't pointing towards any discernible direction. It was pointing directly behind me. The cavern opened before me, a maw of absolute darkness swallowing the beam of my flashlight. It wasn't a natural space. The walls were smooth, almost polished, the rock unnaturally uniform. The air thickened, pressing against my lungs, tasting of ozone and something else, something ancient and indefinable. The grinding had ceased, replaced by a low, pervasive hum that resonated not in my ears but in my bones. It built, a subsonic thrum that vibrated my teeth, blurring my vision. Then I saw it. A pulsating mass dominated the cavern's center, a grotesque bloom of chitin and shadow. It wasn't solid, not entirely. It seemed to writhe, to shift, composed of countless insects, a living tapestry of clicking mandibles and twitching antennae. The hum originated from within it, a chorus of a million voices whispering in a language I couldn't understand, yet somehow felt us. It was a pressure, a weight, a suffocating presence. The compass needle spun wildly, then settled, pointing directly at the swarm. A cold dread bloomed in my chest, a visceral certainty that I was walking toward my own destruction. My legs felt leaden, each step an effort against the oppressive atmosphere. Click, click, click. The sound echoed from the swarm, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat. It was a mockery of life, a mechanical imitation of existence. The visions returned, amplified now, overwhelming. Thorne's scream ripped through my consciousness, the pickaxe falling in slow motion. The family huddled around the table, their smiles stretched into grotesque masks of terror. The Miner frozen mid-swing, his eyes wide with a horror that mirrored my own. They weren't just images anymore, they were Shumbe feelings. The Miner's fear, the family's despair. Thorne's silent yell Truide flooded my mind, drowning out my own thoughts. A metallic tang filled my mouth, the taste of fear so intense it felt like blood. The cat sat perched atop the swarm, a black silhouette against the pulsating mass. Its emerald eyes burned into mine, radiating an unsettling stillness. It wasn't watching me, it was Hadi assessing me. A slow, deliberate blink, a silent judgment. The fricklick resonated again, deeper this time, a guttural sound that seemed to vibrate the very air around me. It felt like a key turning in a lock, unlocking something within my mind. I stumbled, my knees buckling beneath me. The wallpaper, the incongruous floral pattern, seemed to writhe in the shifting light, the roses and lilies twisting into mocking faces. It was a violation, a deliberate affront to the natural order. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to break the suffocating silence. But my voice was trapped, a prisoner in my own throat. The hum intensified, coalescing into a single, unified voice within my head. It wasn't a voice I recognized, yet it felt intimately familiar. We remember. 40, within my skull, a chilling echo of a forgotten past. I felt a tug, a subtle but insistent pull, as if something was reaching into my mind, probing my memories. A wave of disorientation washed over me, blurring the edges of reality. My sense of self began to dissolve, my identity fracturing into a million fragments. Then, a flash, a memory not mine, but almost mine. A child's laughter, the smell of wood smoke, a woman's gentle touch. It was fleeting, ephemeral, yet it resonated with a profound sadness, a sense of loss so intense it brought me to my knees. The icy tendrils tightened their grip, drawing out the memory, claiming it as their own. It felt like a violation, a theft of my very essence. The swarm pulsed, a living heartbeat echoing through the cavern. Click, click, click. The sound grew louder, closer, as if the swarm itself was drawing nearer. The tug intensified, a slow, deliberate unraveling. It wasn't painful, not precisely. More like a profound violation, a theft of something intangible. The memories weren't mine, not entirely. They were filtered, refracted through the swarm's alien consciousness. A playground swing set, the metallic squeal of the chains a discordant counterpoint to childish laughter. My mother's hand warm and reassuring on my small back. Fragments, shards of a life I recognized yet felt disconnected from. They drifted through my mind like dust motes in a dying sunbeam, each one a tiny pinprick of sorrow. We remember. The voice resonated again, deeper this time, laced with a chilling certainty. It wasn't speaking to me. It was speaking through to me. A chorus of whispers, layered and distorted, began to coalesce, forming my name. Judah. Judah. The sound scraped against my skull, a metallic rasp like claws on slate. My knees trembled, the floral wallpaper blurring into a nauseating swirl of crimson and sickly yellow. Each rose seemed to possess a malevolent grin. The swarm pulsed, a rhythmic expansion and contraction that mirrored the frantic beat of my heart. I fought against the intrusion, a desperate clutching at the remnants of my identity. Thorne's face flashed before me, the frozen terror in his eyes, the slackness of his jaw. Then, a replay. I watched him stumble, the pickaxe clattering against the rock, the echo amplified by the cavern's oppressive silence. But it wasn't just a memory. I felt his terror, the icy grip of dread tightening around his throat. The sensation was overwhelming, a suffocating wave that threatened to drown me. Another vision. The family around the table, their smiles stretched into grotesque caricatures. The father's booming laughter, now a hollow mockery. The mother's gentle touch, now a cold, impersonal caress. They were puppets, their movements jerky and unnatural, their eyes vacant and lifeless. And then, I saw them drawn towards the swarm, their bodies dissolving into the pulsating mass, their screams swallowed by the collective hum. A metallic tang, sharper this time, filled my mouth. The taste of despair. The cat blinked again, its emerald eyes burning into mine, reflecting the swarm's grotesque light. It wasn't assessing me anymore. It was 720 welcoming me, a silent invitation to join the chorus. The whispers intensified, weaving themselves into a tapestry of regret and guilt. My failures, my shortcomings, my deepest fears, and they were laid bare, exposed to the swarm's insatiable hunger. The grinding sound returned, a low, guttural rumble that seemed to emanate from within my own bones. Click, click, click. It was a countdown, a ticking clock measuring my descent into oblivion. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperately trying to block out the visions, the voices, the oppressive presence. I focused on a single point, a single memory found in my grandmother's garden, the scent of honeysuckle on a summer evening, anything to anchor myself to reality. But it was no use. The swarm was relentless, its tendrils probing deeper, dismantling my defenses. I saw flashes of other faces, other victims, finers, families, explorers, shindied, all absorbed into the collective consciousness. Their memories, their fears, their regrets, all added to the swarm's insatiable library. Then the horrifying realization. I saw my own reflection flicker within the insect mass, a distorted, grotesque parody of my former self. My features were blurred, indistinct, as if melting into the swarm's collective form. My eyes, once brown and filled with skepticism, were now glowing with the same unsettling emerald light as the cat. A wave of nausea washed over me, a visceral rejection of what I was becoming. "We are you." The voice resonated within my skull, no longer a foreign intrusion, but a chillingly familiar echo. I felt a sense of inevitability, a surrender to the inevitable. The struggle was futile. Resistance was pointless. I was becoming one with the swarm, a single voice in the chorus, a single memory in the collective consciousness. The metallic grinding grew louder, drowning out all other sounds. Click, 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 a final, decisive click. My reflection solidified, no longer a distortion, but a perfect imitation. I opened my eyes and saw only the swarm. The collapse felt abrupt, not the slow, crushing weight I'd anticipated, but a sudden shearing, a release. Dust choked the air, a gritty film coating my tongue. I scrambled, limbs flailing, propelled by a primal urge to escape the suffocating darkness. The grinding had stopped, mercifully, though the echo of it lingered in my skull, a phantom vibration. When I finally burst into the open, the storm was gone. Not dissipated, simply absent. As if a switch had been flipped, the air hung heavy, thick, with the smell of wet earth and something else, something metallic and vaguely sweet. The monochrome landscape pressed in 40 slate-gray sky meeting gray rock, a world drained of color. It felt wrong, distorted, like a photograph taken with a faulty lens. My ears rang, a persistent high-pitched whine that masked the usual sounds of a thunderstorm. The compass, still clutched in my hand, trembled violently. It wasn't pointing north anymore. It spun, a frantic dance of the needle, before settling with a jarring click directly at me. My breath hitched. The thing was supposed to point towards Devontorps's. Not me. A tremor ran through my legs, not from the exertion, but from a burgeoning unease. I scanned the surroundings, expecting something. A figure lurking in the shadows, a glint of insect chitin. Nothing. Just the oppressive silence, the gray sky, and the unsettling certainty that I was being watched. The car, a beat-up Ford Taurus I'd rented in Seattle, sat silently in the small clearing. Raindrops, remnants of the vanished storm, clung to the windshield like ghostly tears. I approached cautiously, the gravel crunching under my boots, a jarringly loud sound in the stillness, and then I saw it. Perched on the hood, silhouetted against the gray sky, was the cat. Its eyes, those unsettling emerald pools, burned into mine. They weren't the eyes of a predator, not precisely. They were. Knowing, calculating, they reflected the dim light with an unnatural intensity, as if the swarm itself was looking back at me through those pupils. A wave of nausea rolled over me, a visceral rejection of the creature's gaze. I wanted to look away, to deny its presence, but I was frozen, trapped in its hypnotic stare. "We remember you." The voice wasn't loud, not audible in the traditional sense. It resonated within my skull, a phantom vibration that bypassed my ears entirely. It was a chorus, layered and distorted, like a recording played backward. It felt familiar, a chilling echo of the whispers I'd heard within the cavern. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself against the intrusion. The silence returned, heavier this time, suffocating. When I opened my eyes, the cat was still there, its gaze unwavering. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This wasn't just about the swarm anymore. It was about me, about something they remembered. Something I had forgotten, or perhaps something I had been deliberately made to forget. The compass spun again, a frantic, erratic dance. I tried to steady it, to regain some semblance of control, but it was useless. The needle vibrated, pointing directly at my chest. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I stumbled, catching myself on the car door. The metallic tang, that taste of despair, returned to my mouth. I glanced down. The cat was gone, vanished without a sound. The silence stretched, taut and oppressive. Then the compass settled. The frantic spinning ceased. The needle locked into place, pointing directly upward, at a spot just above my heart. A single, echoing funk-click resonated in the stillness, followed by absolute unsettling silence.